I helped put an international fugitive behind bars. And this is my story. I grew up in the town of Jeffreys Bay. It is a small town, it is a tourist destination, and it is located between Gqeberha and George, and Jeffreys Bay is a surfing town. It is known internationally as having the best right-hand break in the world, and people come from all over to surf it. Another thing about Jeffreys Bay is that the property development market is booming, and has been booming there for many years, because a lot of retirees want to move in there. A lot of places want to set up rentals and Airbnbs for tourists, so property is always being bought and sold. And my father worked for a property development company. Now, Simon Ferguson would enter our lives, and he would come in like a bomb. So Jeffreys Bay is small, and there are a few prominent figures, but they all know each other. And what happened is that Simon Ferguson, and he's from England, he's British, he has a British accent. He would come into town and he would start spending a lot of money. He would start picking up people's tabs, he would buy people's drinks. He would spend an exceptional amount of money, so much so that it took the interest of the higher ups in Jeffreys Bay. And he said that he was an investor and that he was looking in businesses to invest in. Now, scam artists often do this because they don't want you to think that they need money. So they will often spend such a substantial amount of money that your vulnerabilities would just drop, because you don't think this person wants my money because they've got their own money, right? Now, Simon would become very close to my father, and they would go golfing together, they would go have dinner together, and their friendship formed very quickly. And Simon would be invited over to our house for dinner. Now, I lived in a house in Jeffreys Bay. It was a very old house, and it was a very big house, and things used to go bump in the night there. It was a little bit scary, but that's a story for another day. And we called it the White House. So he would come over to the White House and he would have dinner. And on the first time he came to have dinner, he came up into the living room and he saw a picture of my mom and her brother, my uncle. And he said, "Who's that guy? I know him." And my mom said, "That is my brother, Clive, my uncle Clive." And he was like, "No ways." Simon was like, "No ways." He stayed at my house in England 20 years ago when he used to play hockey for England. And my mom was like, "Really?" And then they phoned Uncle Clive, and then they realized that it was true. And we still don't know to this day if it is like some strange, crazy coincidence, or if perhaps this was more targeted. Because what would happen next would be absolutely crazy. So there's a few warning signs that my mom and I started picking up along the way. So Simon told everyone that he had prostate cancer and that he had to inject himself in his prostate every night. And this is another thing that scam artists do, is because they want you to feel sorry for them. Now, I was checking him out and he was eating a lot of nice food. He was drinking a lot of red wine. And I was thinking to myself, like, whoa, cancer patients do not look like that, right? He was healthy, he was glowing. He was about, I think, 46 at the time, so he was glowing. And then another thing that Simon was doing is that he was a womanizer. And he was going through women in Jeffreys Bay that the rate that some other people change their underwear. Now, what was very concerning was that he was getting more and more involved in my father's company. And he was getting to the point where a large amount of money was going to be released to Simon. A very substantial amount of money. Now, what occurred is that one night at dinner, Simon told everyone, this is another thing about scam artists, is that they simply cannot help themselves. They always have to go one level up to see how much they can get away with in one day, right? And he said that he had studied Egyptology in Cairo University. Now, I was a weird 14-year-old, and I was obsessed with Egypt. I wanted to be an archaeologist at one stage. And for my birthday, I asked my parents to buy me textbooks on Egypt. I know it was weird. I was a weird kid. I probably wouldn't have hung out with me when I was that age. But I really enjoyed Egyptology and I knew a lot about it. So I was like, wow. And I immediately started asking questions about Egyptology. I said, do you know about Ramesses II? What do you think about Akhenaten? And he started giving really vague answers. And he would say something along the lines of, oh no, the priests just used to get high in Egypt. And then he changed the subject. And that made me so suspicious that I went to my mom and I said, Mom, there's something up here. And she agreed with me. She said that there is something strange going on. Can I do some research? So now I have to preface this. In those days, we're talking about 15 years ago, maybe 16 years ago, the internet was not what it is today. We had something known as dial-up. You couldn't just go onto your computer immediately and connect to the internet. You had to dial up over the landline. You had to wait a while. And the internet searching wasn't as good as it was today. We don't have deep search. We couldn't look as many people up as we would have wanted to. And another thing about Simon Ferguson is that he used to play cricket in England. So when I first Googled his name, all of those results came up. Now, I started Googling and Googling and Googling, and I started adding things like Simon Ferguson and scammer and those sort of results. And what I found was hectic. The first thing that came up was Interpol. And it said there, and it had his picture. He is a bald guy. It had his picture on it that said Simon Ferguson wanted by Interpol. And it gave his age. And I looked at it, and he had been charged of stealing millions of pounds in the UK. And they had let him out on bail. And when he had gone out on bail, he had taken a flight to Cape Town. And he had skipped bail. So the UK authorities had been looking for him. But then it got worse. Because the South African authorities were also looking for him. Because in Cape Town, you know, scam artists, they don't stop. It's like serial killers. They don't stop. They will be scamming their whole lives. He started taking investor money in Cape Town. He was issuing fake share certificates. I've covered a few of those cases on my channel. He was doing dodgy things. And there had been a task force in Cape Town that had been set up to locate him because he had absconded from there as well. And I just remember phoning my mom and saying, Mom, you need to come home now. And I just remember hitting print, 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 and printing out this manuscript almost of information on this man. Now, my mom would come home and we still had these stairs that came up to the house. And as she came up the stairs, I came running out and said, he's a scammer. And I still remember my mom got such a fright because money was just about to be transferred that she fell up the stairs and she opened her leg. I still remember it in vivid detail to this day. Now, what happened after then? Well, My mom didn't want Simon to know that I was the one who found out that he was a scammer. So what she did is that she told my dad's boss that it was her that had to protect me, because I was a minor, that she had found information, and then she took the information to my dad's boss. My dad's boss confronted Simon, and you know what Simon did? Simon stole the petty cash money because he had access, he had office keys. He had finagled himself so into the company. He had access to some of the finances. He was just about to get access to all of the finances, and we're talking millions and millions and millions. But they blocked that from him. So what he did is that he broke into the office with his keys and he stole the petty cash. I think it was like 200 Rand back in those days. Scam artist for you. Now, my mom contacted a detective who was at the head of this task force in Cape Town because they were looking for him, and said, listen, he's in Jeffreys Bay. And the detective said, yes, he's going to come down, but he needs to make a few arrangements first before they could arrest him. Now, this is my mom's perspective. Maybe I'll get her on one day to tell her side of the story or her point of view of it. But according to her, she was at a restaurant in Jeffreys Bay while she was waiting for this detective to come down. He was going to come down in a few days. And Simon was at the same restaurant, and he saw my mom, and then he went like this to her, and she took it as a threat. I mean, I don't know how someone cannot take that as a threat. And we didn't know what he was capable of, so she went to the police and she filed a statement and said, look, if anything happens to me, if I'm killed, then it's Simon Ferguson who's been threatening my life. So what would happen was that Simon Ferguson would be arrested and he would be sentenced for fraud in Cape Town. And from there, he would make his new home Pollsmoor Prison in Cape Town. And I'm not too sure if he is still there, because his sentence was about, I think, 15 years. But after that, he was wanted by the British government. So they had started an extradition treaty with him, and they were going to extradite him, or they have extradited him to the UK, where he is currently facing charges or is in prison there. I couldn't find a lot of updates now when I was searching the news, so I'm not too sure what the outcome is. But I do know is that he went to Pollsmoor Prison. Now, if you enjoyed this video, please consider subscribing as well as giving me a like. Thank you.